Welcome to the Helsi podcast, where we invite you to invest in your well-being and unlock the secrets of vibrant health, peak performance, and wellness. Join us, Sebastian Mirau and Johannes Kettelhout, co-founders of Australia and New Zealand's leading wellness company, as we dive deep into the science, strategies, and stories that empower you to live your healthiest, happiest life. Whether you are a CEO, high achiever, entrepreneur, elite athlete, health enthusiast, scientist, or self-improvement seeker, together we will explore the cutting edge of biohacking techniques and holistic health practices with world-class experts that optimize your mind, body, and spirit. With each episode, you will walk away with practical and actionable steps to integrate in your daily life. Are you ready? Let's elevate your well-being.
Thanks for coming, Dan. I'm so excited to talk to you because I think with the experience that you had of going really all in, of using your body and your brain, it was all your capacities really to achieve, sports goals. I'm sure it gave you a really deep insight of what might be missing in that industry and in general in society to really keep up with, what I guess would be described as a really high-performing human, and also a balanced human. And I'm sure you had quite a journey to get to the point where you found the right tools and the right approach to, I guess, support all sorts of people, all different walks of life to get to that point. Is that sort of like going in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all a work in progress, aren't we? So, for me, I took a liking to sport really early on. Started playing soccer at, I think, 7 or 8 years of old in sort of organised sport. And then, played for a good 10 years of that and made some rep teams and found my way into footy, so AFL, so Aussie rules. It took me interstate. I grew up in Tasmania, moved to South Australia, studied a sports science degree. And I think you get into your early 20s and you get to a level of footy and what might be considered competence in life. And you think, okay, I'm going all right here. And then, as the time rolls on, you start to discover more things and develop more self-awareness and realize how naive you were. And it's an absolute journey, man. You probably summed it up really well in terms of why we do what we do now with our business, in that it's providing an experience, an opportunity for others to self-discover some of these things earlier in the piece, so they can put into good effect during their careers, but also outside of sport, like in business and in school as well.
So maybe we talk quickly already about what you're doing now, and then we sort of unravel and go a little bit back, sort of how you actually figure that out, because I think that's often where people see themselves and realize sort of, okay, this is the missing piece, and here I can actually, jumpstart this or really shorten the learning by working with you. So if you don't mind, sort of like, what are you doing now?
Yeah, of course. So we run a business called the Adaptability Movement, which is actually just going through the process of coming in under another brand called Driven From Within. And as part of that, we offer 3 main program offerings. So we have our Adaptable Sports Academies, which is working in clubs, professional sporting organisations, so amateur clubs as well. And what we do is we lead teams and leaders through a process of that self-discovery, providing play-based experience of how do we test ideas, how do we become more self-aware, more capable, more competent, and more coachable in that environment. Or if we're leaders, well, how do we become the catalyst for that within our organisation? So we do that with the Adaptable Sports Academies. We run another program called Greater Me, and there's a number of offerings under that as well, and that's our schools-based product. And so we're essentially doing the same thing, but it's not limited by sport. So we're not having to have sports people in there or people that are sort of, potentially sort of fit athletes, but it's an opportunity for disengaged kids or prefects or even primary school leadership to be able to lead through a similar experience of that self-discovery of how to become more self-aware, how do I have more conviction in my decisions, emotionally regulate things better, become more adaptable and just competent in day-to-day life. So we feel like we're navigating and co-creating our own existence, right? And then we've got the guiding principles of leading teams, and that's one which is working with leadership teams, both in executive teams in schools, leadership and across corporate organisations as well.
Very cool. So would you say most of your tools are psychologically coming out of the psychological area, or is it a mixture out of quite a few different things?
Yeah. So it's that social and emotional type learning for sure. Like it's, I guess, we only know what we know. And sometimes we know a little bit about what we don't know, but it's the stuff that we don't know, which is where all the opportunity for growth comes from. And so we're, again, out there trying to be the catalyst for the discovery of that. And it's just adapting it to a different environment in terms of how we influence that group of people. Like it's something we care deeply about. We've gained a lot out of it ourselves by being more mindful and adaptable in everything we do. And you mentioned psychology. Well, it is underpinned by acceptance and commitment therapy, which is something that I've spent a bit of time on as well. Becoming more competent at,
Gotcha.
And then developing into a really practical and experiential, way of delivering that to a group of people.
So how did you get into that? That's quite a specific thing. So I would argue probably if someone really looks into these types of tools and eventually helps others, there must be a problem that you needed to solve for yourself, I guess, at one stage, right?
Yeah, look, I think that's probably fair enough. I probably grew up, I grew up as a very insecure teenager. I felt like I didn't feel accepted or like I fit in high school and that kind of thing. And so for me, it was always trying to prove myself, trying to prove my worth to people. And, it became kind of a blessing and a curse because it would drive me to new heights and to, be a high achiever in a lot of areas, but it would also somewhat repel, connection with others because everything kind of felt like a competition, I guess. So for me, it's a lot of it comes from that introspection. Like it's looking inwards and kind of going, well, I'm not satisfied with this, and how can I evolve myself further and develop better connection. Being probably my top priority as a value is connection with others, and connection with myself, connection with my environment. So to do that, it's like, well, what tools do I need? What do I need to test? How do I expand my knowledge and experience to be able to both do that better for myself, but then to share it with others.
Gotcha. So did that happen while you were still a professional athlete, or did that happen afterwards in retrospective when we look back sort of on your career as football player?
Yeah, look, like I said before, it's a work in progress. So I would say there's iterations of me over time, and there's probably, key points within that journey where I've had a challenge. And throughout that challenge, I've then had to go more into that reflective state and sort of then, understand a bit more about myself and how I overcome that. One of the big definitive moment in my life was I had a career-ending ankle injury playing football in 2012. Didn't know that it was career-ending. Had a month of conservative rehab, 6 operations over nearly 2 years, and was left incapacitated where I couldn't walk without pain and couldn't run, couldn't jump. Quality of life was heavily impacted. So I would say that's, throughout that experience, there was deep reflection. There was, some mental health challenges. There was, the opportunity to kind of really drill down on who I could rely on and maybe, others that weren't present in that journey. And, what did I need to do to sort of feel competent and capable in my own life, and to see hope in the future rather than, feeling like, geez, I'm 29 years of age and have I already ascended to my peak and is this it for now? Is it a slow, slippery dip for the rest of my days? Because, to me, that wouldn't have been satisfying. So if I can give you just a brief introduction to what adaptability is to me, given it's formative to what I do, is a lot of people I ask or have heard the word resilience, particularly in the last 4 years. And a lot of people have had it offered to them as a solution to their problems. And many of them have found that hasn't been sufficient to be able to help them feel content with their lives again. And so I would say that, there's a spectrum that we need to go through. And I think being transparent about that is really important. So resilience is that first step that says that I'm going to stay in the game. It's a thing that is, I guess, for lack of a better word, it prevents or it delays failure, right? Failure is only final and fatal when we stop. So resilience is the thing that keeps you in the game. We move on to perseverance or persistence or grit or whatever you want to call it. And there's been a lot of emphasis put on, that as well. And I would say that's useful. That's where I spent most of my my life as a soccer player, as a football player, as in sport, and that is that narrowly focused mindset towards a goal. And it can be really useful, but it can also be really harmful in that when we're too rigid around how we engage with that persistence and perseverance, we become frustrated. We meet resistance, and we tend to really sort of almost implode. And so we've got to move beyond that as well. And what I say to people is, well, adaptability is the infinite possibility that exists beyond that. So if resilience is this temporary, finite, backup store that we use to keep us going in times of need, in times of stress, then adaptability is the infinite possibility of what could be, what comes next. Like, how else could I do this? And a lot of the time, people will need a challenge to be able to reveal that to themselves. It's not something we're taught about in school necessarily. It's not something we're often gifted by others. So, what we've tried to do is create an environment for how can we be a challenger to that? How can we use tools like constraint-led learning, which is it's a tool that's used in skill acquisition to be able to introduce like barriers, challenges, to take away comfort, and to rapidly sort of shift back and forth with those interventions, so that someone has to sit in discomfort for a while. They have to, problem solve and work their way through that. And there's an opportunity to reflect and become more aware of how they respond to those types of challenges.
What are those typical challenges that you see with your clientele?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest one in sport would be putting pressure on themselves. Being a high achiever, there's so much self-judgment, and it really becomes disabling in terms of optimal performance. So, and it's not exclusive to sport, but it's certainly a key theme. Connection, like what we've seen over the last 4 years, is that isolation that's occurred with all of the different things around, social distancing and withdrawal from sports and community sort of experiences. So re-establishing that connection and demonstrating to people, how you can be a catalyst for that, how you can develop deeper and more meaningful connection with yourself and with others. So I think that's really important as well. And I think the other thing is there's a real risk aversion, like within society, and the way that we approach new things and change. And the world is going through rapid change at the moment. And the first thing that we need to be, in my opinion, to be aware of is how do we respond to a perceived threat, or how do we respond to change? And most people will sort of drop into that fight, flight, freeze type mindset of, I've got to take action, whether it's informed or not, I'm doing it, or I'm paralyzed by maybe fear or not knowing what to do and not wanting to make a mistake, or I'm going to get out of here because I just can't cope. And so bringing some awareness to what people tend to default to has been really helpful in generating some self-awareness around, cool, I've noticed that. I've also now had some experience with using some tools to be able to ground that, to get back to more of an emotionally grounded state. And then I've got the opportunity to see, or the chance to see the opportunity and change, and where can I utilize that to in a more helpful way.
Yeah. I guess the great thing about this topic is that or the sad thing, depending on how you want to look at it, is that, everyone knows it in some ways. You can go all the way to, the CEOs and those high achievers there, A players that really, want to do, always more, because, there's never quite enough, which means there's a constant, certainly not adaptability, but one, like, they're looking for resilience, but that's probably not really where you want to get to. And then, you go all the way to people that look after kids, stay-at-home moms. They would have the same problem in a sense, because if you have that mindset of you really want to drive and want to get it, make it perfect and so on, then at one stage, I think you will run into multiple places. You will run into these challenges where I can see when you use the word adaptability, that's very different, because it means that your true north is allowed to be changed as well, correct? Right? Like, rather than just going. It's like
100%
questioning, sort of like, what is this really about, or how can I really add the most value to the team if you speak of sports, for example, right?
Yeah, I mean, we often hear that we got to find more balance, and it's like, well, we're supposed to be a high achiever here and a high achiever there, and so the balance is fluid. Like balance is something to be navigated and to adapt to. So, yeah.
Right. Right. So if I think about sport in particular, coming back sort of to your background, I guess it's a really limited time that you can be really in that profession. And I don't know, when you said, like late 20s is when your injury happened, I don't know how much longer you could go for that. But if I think about many other professions, you have at least longer to figure it out. But I also imagine that it would be the same story, that people rather burn out or completely fail before they really realize what is needed there. And so my question that I love to ask, specialists like yourself is like, how do we realize that we have a problem? And how do we realize it earlier than when it's, everything is, on shaky ground and you really, you're in, emergency mode? How do you see, the smoke before you actually realize, before it becomes a fire?
Yeah. So, I guess the simplest answer to that is we need to stop and reflect. So we need to get back to slow thinking and to invite that time into our lives. And what I've noticed is that we're living in a hyper-vigilant society where we're always looking out for danger. We're always trying to fill that space with something. There's always a distraction that meets our need. And so to be able to recognize those things in ourselves further, to then obviously plan for it, to be able to attend to it, to nourish ourselves, we have to have slow thinking. We have to have slow time. So the way I describe it to people that we work with is that we generally have three states of being, in terms of we're either in the thinking mind, the doing mind, or the being. And the thinking is that, it's the thinking about the future, or it's reflecting on the past, but it's captivated by it. It's taking you out of the moment. It's the self-judgment. It's the analysis. It's where we're spending most of our time, even when we're feeding in those distractions. Then there's the doing. The doing is the sport. It's the music. It's the opportunity to sort of narrowly focus on something and be in perpetual motion. And it's relieving. Like, it's an outlet for people, and it helps. But if we're just ping-ponging back and forth between those two, we're never gonna slow down and be satisfied. We're never gonna generate true sort of self-awareness and contentment in quiet and stillness. And so then there's the being, and the being is that mindfulness piece, which is around how do we get to a place where we can just be comfortable with right now and know that the only thing that exists is right now. And so therefore, like, that's where creativity is born. That's where, we get to regenerate. That's where we get to sort of look inwardly and notice what's going on with our bodies and with our, mental, emotional state. And therefore we've got the first, step in action to then be able to do something about it.
So my assumption would be that the being state is the one that is missing for most people, or that is commonly missing, and creates therefore the challenges that we see in our professional life or in our development or whatever you look at.
Yeah, look, I'd agree with that. It's the one place. So one of the common words that we hear, particularly from young people, is they're bored. And so there's this fear of boredom. And boredom, like, when you start to explore that, is basically just stillness.
Wow.
Like not having something to occupy their mind, which, they want to be in that doing state, because the doing state helps them escape to thinking without having to then notice and feel what they're experiencing. So yeah, absolutely. The being sort of state is the one that we're looking to gently nurture people into more of.
So just to go back to the being and the boredom. So are you saying that kids don't have the tool, or don't have the understanding what stillness is? Like, what is it about stillness? Like, I heard that boredom is quite good for kids. I have a few kids, and and when luckily they don't use that word a lot, but I'm aware that when that is, I feel quite comfortable with it, because I believe something is coming out of this boredom too. But there's an issue with it, by the sounds of it, you said.
Yeah, look, I think if we're to acknowledge that this generation has grown up very differently to even what we did, during our sort of childhood, in that there's just constant distractions, there's constant opportunity to sort of lose yourself in something, and often that's social media, There's all the streaming services that exist now. There's gaming. There's a lot of it is digital. Devices have really become a thing that just occupy our attention. And I'll give the simple example of like when you go to maybe a shopping center with your friends and one of them goes to the toilet, but you're not going with them. Well, often what we see is the person that's not going in is pulling their phone out to distract themselves. So rather than sitting there or standing there and just observing their surroundings, noticing what they're feeling, reflecting on a moment or an experience they've had throughout the day, it's constant sort of input, and it just throws our nervous system out of balance. We don't get that opportunity to sort of drop back into that parasympathetic state, that rest and recovery that allows us to regenerate. And so we're in this hyper-vigilant state, which means that we're sort of overstimulated a lot of the time without the chance to come down from that. So boredom, like you said, is a great opportunity to navigate that. However, there is such an aversion to being bored because of the risk of feeling what I'm feeling, which I've been endlessly escaping until that point.
That is fascinating. I get goosebumps listening to it because it makes so much sense to me, and it's also so obvious when you explain it. Like there's not much to like if we just accept that we need to reflect and be and be aware of our body, of our feelings, of all of that, and if we take that away by a simple thing like being just always on streaming, gaming, social media, you have it, then this goes. Of course, there's no space for it. That makes a lot of sense. I would probably think the only time when that really would then happen is, I guess, when we go into bed. But then we are also on our devices there. I'm guilty of that quite often too. So
right.
Would you then say that? So what happens then? What happens then when people actually don't they almost must have a backlog of development of figuring out who they are, especially when you look about young people. Talk about young people, yes.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. So it's like this damn wall, like this thing, this temporary barrier holding up all of those emotions, and that's where the aversion comes from, because there's such a fear of that when I let go, when I allow that in, then there's this tsunami, this overwhelm of stuff that I haven't allowed myself to feel, and so that's where it's the art in what we do, I guess, in that we're trying to create safety around the experience that we're providing people. So that's not to limit their experience. That's just to allow them to be more open, to be more reflective. And to do that, we have to provide them with a balance of fast thinking and slow thinking experiences so that they get a chance to do and find safety in the doing. And then just these little micro snippets of being and reflecting. And what we do is we do that in, one-on-one. We do it in small groups. We don't spend too long doing it initially, but it's introducing that opportunity to reflect and to have someone there to bounce that off, to bring that to life through verbalizing it, and to relate to someone else in that moment as well. And as we go through like our program experience, it's then generating more and more of those opportunities. And what we see is that sort of this revealing of who is within, this safety in being a little more vulnerable and more open. And once we get to that point, there's this connection that's really starting to develop. I would say that throughout my experience of those 6 operations and I guess the challenges that I faced is that, the more that I allowed myself to be vulnerable and to open up to others, the more I was rewarded with deeper connections. So that was, a gift that such a challenge brought to my life.
Is it as basic as that if I would be a person that is constantly on my devices and someone does something really kind to me, let's say my grandma made a cake for me or something like that, and initially I wanted to actually say thank you, or initially I thought, that was a good idea, but that thought was quickly replaced by just whatever happened on my screen. And then I never really acknowledged or even realized that someone, in this case, my grandma, did something kind to me. Is it that type of thing? So that the emotion never hit me. I never realized that someone was caring for me. Is that sort of like an example of it?
I think, yeah. Look, it kind of is. It's a thing that's pulling us away from mindfully living our lives and from connecting with others. So it's it's intervening on true connection with both ourselves and others. So one of the tools that we use are called bookmark moments, and we introduced this very early in any experience that you have with a new group. And a bookmark moment is it's a term that I coined with my wife back in 2016 when we were getting married, and we got all the well-intended advice around, how crazy the day was going to be, how you weren't going to get a chance to, talk to each other, to try and make the most of it and just be present. It's like, as you unpack that, you go, well, how do I be more mindful? How do I be more present? When do I do that? How do I do it? Why am I doing it? And there's all of these unaddressed sort of barriers to actually being able to action it. And so what Kim and I talked about was, well, like, let's make it bookmark moments throughout the day. So take something which is a very visible, people can picture it. They can, I can take that and I can place that in my book and that holds my place. Well, we're just doing the same thing with a memory. And so what we would do is we'd invite someone else into that space. So with that being on our wedding day, that's my wife. And so each time that we caught ourselves being present in a moment, we could then invite the other one into that to record and bookmark that moment for later. So it's something we can come back and celebrate and share with each other. So what we try to do with a lot of the tools and the activities that we do throughout the experience we provide is to make things accessible to people, to demonstrate that it's, you may not be there now. You might look at the person up in front of you leading you through this experience and go, well, that's not me, I'm not them, my life is different. And it's like, well, all of these things, they're universal tools, and it's just about how you choose to engage with them and which ones you utilize to be in a helpful way for yourself.
Gotcha. So just speak to me a little bit more about the practicality of it. So you just mentally make a note of like, this is a really special moment. Is that what you mean by inviting someone else in it? Or how would you say that
Yeah,
works?
absolutely. So, there's moments throughout a day where I'll catch myself. I've got quite proficient at doing this myself, and I'll be like, cool, like I'm in that moment now. But I really love it bringing someone else into that. So, and particularly within the programs we run, if we've already had that conversation, then I can draw someone's attention to the fact that we're living one of those moments right now. And that's something we're sharing together. I can do that in a group situation where I'm making eye contact with one person that I'm talking directly to. And so then it's the habit of doing it often. So I was talking about this with a colleague today around the little and often principle. And the idea is that it's, this, I guess, big shot, big impact type thing. It's a bit of a hit and hope strategy. But if we're to create, little micro habits and we're to stack those on top of each other, then it's just the repetition of those that lead to incremental gains. And that will help us feel like we're in perpetual motion. So, for us, it's like, how often can we give people the chance to reflect on that, to notice, what they just felt, to think back to what was a bookmarked moment in what they just experienced. And so they get the opportunity to put a timestamp on that so they can come back to that later.
Brilliant. I love that. Yeah, little and often. Yeah, there's this whole 1% idea, right? Like if you just get 1% better, incrementally, it makes a huge, huge difference. Love that. So how well is this known? How well is this problem actually known in society, especially with, I guess parents, but if I think about it also, our leaders or people with a lot of responsibility, are they aware of the danger that if they don't do that, they're actually not functioning in the most ideal way and therefore can't be of service and a team player with others because they're actually not really have the full spectrum available to themselves because they shut down quite a bit of that reflection time and of that, what you call being time?
Yeah. Look, I think there's an awareness and a recognition that things aren't right, that we're not operating in our optimal state. However, I don't think there's a recognition of the root cause of that, or there's an unwillingness to recognize it. There's a saying, and I hope I get this right, but it's like, don't expect a person to understand something that their job relies on them not understanding. So try that again. So don't expect a person to understand something that their job relies on them not understanding. And so what I mean by that is there's a conflict. Like, so we're talking about moving into an era where there's more technology, there's more time online, there's all of the efficiency that is supposed to come with that. And yet what we're actually seeing is the opposite of that. We're seeing and experiencing a distracted mind. We're constantly sort of pulled away from being in the moment. and it's impacting our relationship with ourselves and others. And that brings with it a level of dissatisfaction in the day-to-day experience of life.
I would probably even say it's dangerous, right? It's dangerous to just society to quite a degree as well. If you...
Oh, absolutely. It's recognizing the risk in not addressing the issue. So we often talk about, well, there's a risk in trying something new. There's a risk in sort of embracing change. But what's the risk in not embracing? What's the risk in not acknowledging that there could be opportunity in that for us? And I think that we're on the precipice of that. Like, we've got to make a decision one way or the other. And you know, my experience of that is that we generally have to make that for ourselves. But what we can do is we can model that to others, and we can offer, you know, support and encouragement to others on their journey in doing that as well.
Very cool. What's a simple exercise that you could give? Maybe two different types. So what would you say to parents they could help their bored kids, or, you know, their distracted kids that they could do to sort of get into the flow of actually being? And if you talk about a, you know, high flying executive, how would you support that person to say, look, you know, you need the being state as part of your life, and a little sort of hack how they would be able to slip that into their life.
So I think, you know, I'll offer something for sure, because I want to give your listeners something they can potentially use, and hopefully those that are listening to this are better prepared for this. I also think there's a real resistance to this in society, because again, we like to step into that and to try something, and we often need someone's support and encouragement and maybe guidance to lead us into this. But one of the simple tools that I've found really useful, and we use this in our programs and we offer it to people to do just what you're saying, is to go outside, to basically remove yourself from all of those distractions, particularly the technological ones. Take your shoes off, get barefoot, and just plant yourself on the earth. And, you know, if you've got a drink of water there, that's great, like something nourishing and sort of hydrating and that kind of thing. But the idea is that we're trying to ground ourselves. So both, you know, physically and emotionally. And just being in contact with the earth, that allows us to do that. So there's many different principles behind that, both Eastern and Western philosophies, you know, both modern day science and, you know, ancient sort of healing practices. But at a fundamental level, it's resetting our nervous system. Now, it's not going to happen in a minute, because we've had this concentrated chronic experience of being attached to a device or to, you know, that distracted state. But if we can just go out there and be, and just stand on the earth for 10 minutes, I'll guarantee you'll notice something.
Yeah. And that's not really asked too much to, you know, if you would say to someone like, look, you know, it is, I can see you're just too like, you know, you're an influencer, you're constantly on this thing on the social media and so on, you know, it will impact your actually ability to interact with your followership, with your loved ones, and recognize yourself, and being actually self-reflective, that you actually know where you're at, who you are, how you feel, and what you need. I think that what you need is also really, really important.
Yes.
If you know, it's not too much to ask to just say, like, these 10 minutes, let it be either the beginning of the morning, you just hold on to your coffee and you just go bare feet, or you know, at the end of the day. Maybe coffee is not the best idea, because that doesn't help your nervous system, but, you know, like whatever it might be that brings
no, not the coffee this time.
Yeah. You're right. Or at the end of the day, and just making that a habit. I think, yeah, I can see how powerful that is, and that's really not too much to ask. You know,
yeah,
you have 24 hours.
No, I think one of the other things that we can do to help us create a habit out of that is just to set a timer. Like, set a timer that every 45 minutes that you're going to go and do that. So rather than waiting and playing this sort of boom and bust game of, oh, I'm irritable, I'm overstimulated, or I'm just drained, and then going out to relieve that, because really our intention has changed. Then our intention is really about escaping that feeling rather than allowing those feelings to flow through us. So it's still a useful tool, and I would absolutely use it myself. But if we can create a habit out of that says that, well, I'm just going to have a timer that goes off every 45 minutes, and maybe I don't need to take 10 minutes now, I only need to take 5. And that becomes something that increases productivity, increases, you know, satisfaction with your day, you know, creates more moments. Well, then that's a win.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what people don't realize is that sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, in the sense, I don't know, like when I reflect back on the last week, like I was in 5 different time zones within a week, and that's not ideal and doesn't happen often. But it was one of those things where there was a lot of physical stress because of that. And at the end of the day, I wanted to do it like quite a slow task. And I realized that, I just couldn't get it done, and it took 20, 30 minutes and so on.
Yeah.
And, in the end, I think I gave up and said, like, okay, I go to bed and see what I can do tomorrow. I think the task took me less than 5 minutes once I was capable again of doing that. And I use this really extreme example, but, it will be the same. So when you say every 45 minutes, just have a 5 or 10-minute break, the first reaction that even I have is like, there's a lot of time during the day where I don't do anything. But when you put it in perspective and say like, yeah, and then you can actually, your output will be double because of it. I don't know if you can quantify it, it's beside the point, but but then actually be really, really, refreshed and can do it at that moment. It's actually a really efficiency tool.
Yeah.
As contra logical it really seems if you don't understand sort of the background of something like that.
Yeah. And it's just one idea, right? Like the whole thing of, self-experimentation, like N=1, is that I go and test it myself. And I give myself a couple opportunities to see if that works for me. And if it doesn't, well, I find another way. So I don't do that. I get one of my colleagues does that. Like, so he'll, get off his computer. He might do some stretches in the office or head outside. For me, I just catch myself and I notice it more because I've made a habit of that over time. And there's times when I don't do that well. That's the other thing to recognize, to be self-forgiving and to accept our imperfections as being, uniquely human, being okay with that.
Yeah.
And that each time that we allow ourselves that, it's more likely that we'll look after ourselves better in future.
Right. So be adaptable to the situation and at hand, right?
Absolutely.
So, have you also dove into sort of the body part of things? So when you talk about adaptability, me having sort of more like a wellness background that comes sort of out of the physical, do you work with people also on that level, that they actually, ground themselves back into the body? I can see that going outside, going barefoot would fit into that. But is there more that you sort of have discovered that you found can really switch for people?
Yeah, so look, my journey started as that part of it, as the physical side of it, as a sports scientist and a strength and conditioning coach, and very heavily into the wellness side of things, but at first very in the physical form. And so what we've done over time is we've evolved that to become more holistic and to include that physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspect of how do we look after and nourish ourselves. So well, I'm fortunate to have had that experience first, because that has given me the tools to then be able to go offer them to others, because the physical part is the easiest entry point for most people. It's the least threatening. And so, creating tools that allow someone to experience something in motion by doing something through movement or activity or game-based play, that can be the bridge between, entering into this space or just, shutting off from it completely.
Do you have an opinion on tools, sort of, let's say for growing up, like kids, teenagers, that you find work better than others? I've heard both sides in terms of team sport, not team sport, like something that they self-guided, something that where they have a coach. Like, can you see that one might help better to I guess to balance out the person than another, or would you say that there's pros and cons for both?
Look, there's definitely pros and cons for both, but I would just say test it, and try both. Like, I often played more than one sport at once, and what a lot of parents don't understand is that doing that is beneficial. So doing that up until 14 odd years of age, even if you think your child's going to have a professional career, is beneficial to that likelihood of that happening and that being an outcome. Now, not everyone's seeking a professional career out of it, but that those different environments will teach you different things. A team environment teaches you around social responsibility, around communication skills. There's relatability. There's the opportunity to sort of challenge in both a cooperative and a competitive nature. And in the individual sort of scenario, well, we've got to get comfortable with everyone else feeling like a threat initially, because our success, is dependent on us being better than everyone else around us in our mind. But then what we come to discover is that if we don't surround ourselves with people better than us, we'll never have anything to aspire to. And so there's a whole host of different kind of emotional opportunities, I guess you could say, that you go through in each of those. And I've been fortunate enough to play a number of team sports, but also to what I haven't mentioned yet is that following that 6 operations and 2-year break, I came back as a discus athlete, as a para athlete, and went on to make a national or 2 national teams as a para discus thrower. So there was a whole different experience of sport that I went through then as a para athlete, now as an individual athlete, as someone that was new to a sport again, was having to learn from scratch in a sport that had these really finite outcomes as opposed to the infinite kind of possibility that exists in a game of football. And that it led to a lot of frustration, but it also gave me the opportunity to shift that mindset from rigid and dogmatic and persistent to being more adaptable and to being able to sort of see the opportunity in those things. So I would say that as an athlete, frustration often influenced my performance, or at least how I felt about my performance. And that now, sort of post-career, the thing that's probably been of the greatest benefit to me is that when I feel frustration now, I recognize it as a gift. Like, I recognize it for what it is, which is it's bringing my attention to something. It's letting me know that I'm not satisfied with where I'm at, but that I don't have to grind or push through that. I just have to have a little bit more of that being time to then be able to then respond in an optimal way rather than in a dogmatic and rigid way.
That's really powerful. That's extremely powerful. Would you say there is literature on this? I'm just thinking about, like, of course, like ideally, working with you, we'll give all the tool, and we have to definitely mention also how we can work with you. But like overall, like, is there a particular sort of school, that is school, a train of, like, a thought school that goes with it? Because I think that's incredibly powerful. If I think about, I can think about any age group in any profession or walk of life that would not, like, anyone would benefit from seeing it as, the obstacle is the way, which one thing that the Stoics would say is, like, the obstacle is actually how you get there. But, like, what would you say is like a good philosophy to look into to understand that? Because I think if you nail that, like, life is sweet. Sounds to me like that anyway, because, like, like any challenges that it suddenly you get, as you said.
Yeah, I would say that it's less about doing a course and it's more about curious inquiry. So the idea that what else is there that I don't know? What else is there out there that could be helpful to me, that other people have found helpful for them? What can I test? So it's more around a mindset of how we engage with learning than it is actually a course in learning. The best opportunities that you might be able to find for that is things that use that practical and experiential learning method, which we're talking about, in that we're gonna go and do something. We're gonna go and test this as a concept. We may not even tell you too much about the concept to begin with. We might just allow you to have that experience first, and then we'll use the art of reflection and conversation to be able to reveal the learnings out of that.
So
is that too opaque for you?
No. I'm good with that. And I think the concept alone is so powerful. And I have to remind myself almost daily, like, I don't know, like, I'm a CEO of a company, so normally only stuff comes to me that is a problem. Like, that's my job. Like, basically, I know where this whole, this company is meant to go to, and I monitor this. This is my job, and find things that are not working well. And I know well that if I'm, to your point, if I'm balanced, I have much more capacity to deal with, bad news and big challenges in a much calmer way. But, going that extra step, as you described it, and say, like, fantastic, like, this will make me more adaptable if I actually get through this challenge. This obstacle is actually, like, the more the better, sort of. If you have that mindset, the more the better. That's just perfect, because you come home and say, like, this was a great day because so many things went wrong and I had to deal with it. And I think everyone can relate to that in one way or another. It doesn't matter what you do in your life.
There's a big piece around just accepting where something is at, to then be able to respond in the way that we would like, rather than not constantly fighting where we're at.
I got a lot out of that concept. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Then, If we want to connect with you, what are the best ways to learn more about what you have to offer and how you interact and engage with people? Do you do online courses as well for people who might not be in Australia?
Yeah, so the online stuff's in the pipeline. It's something we probably tried to do too early, and it became a distraction from, I guess, us being face to face with people, which is definitely desirable. Like to be able, if you're leading someone through an experience. So, we work with teams and organisations, and we exist to progress the performance of people and teams. So, to connect with us, you can head to drivenfromwithin.com.au to look at all of our offerings around executive teams, education, and the corporate world. If you're within a school, then it's head to greater.me, which is gr8r.me. And if you're looking to interact with us in a sports scene, then it's the adaptabilitymovement.world. You can also find me on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my posting. And that's cool. That's the first point of, I guess, just connecting and learning about each other and exploring if there's an opportunity to collaborate.
Fantastic. Dan, this has been so helpful. I could talk to you so much more because I can see that you've really engaged with this content quite a bit and really like it. And it's funny, like this doesn't sound like a more particular modality. What this actually really is, it's just like a way of being. And I think everyone
yes.
can benefit from getting a little bit more like that. I think this is what is really lacking. And what I also picked up from you in the beginning, I picked up on you saying we will find a point where this becomes way more important and recognized, which gives me hope because, at the moment, you could really focus on digital world becomes more and more into our face and it keeps going. But yeah, by the sounds of it, you can see also that this will have a turning point at one stage when it gets too painful, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, when we're mindful about it, we recognize that we have a choice. There's a lot of language and a lot of conditioning, in our daily experience that says we didn't have a choice or we had to do it because someone else, expected of us, told us to, it was mandated, it was whatever. And so I think just when we recognize that we still have a choice, that's powerful.
Very powerful. Well, thank you very much for all your amazing work that you're doing. Thanks for sharing this as well, and also the examples and practical ideas that the audience can try it as well. And please everyone get in touch with Dan's content. I think it's absolutely amazing. Following him on LinkedIn. That's Dan Kirk. You will find him there easily. And all the best, man. I look forward to see much more, and I look forward to also some online offerings because I think you're on the money. This is what society needs.
Thanks, Sebastian. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners, mate.
We hope you got a lot out of today's inspiring conversation. Please share this episode with someone you know needs to hear it. Whether they are a seasoned health expert or just beginning their wellness journey, these stories of remarkable transformation, success, and valuable insights will certainly help empower more people. Until next time, have the best life ever.